you don't come with us in England because you can have better life with your daughter. He just said, come here just working in the spa and just doing massage. I thought it's just only massage. I didn't know that he wanna put me in the spa, like prostitution. He forced me to sleep with him, and I didn't like this. He just make me do like stuff that I wouldn't do it. I did try to go, to run away. No for trouble, just run away far away. Nobody can find me. So I decided to just stay there because I have got no choice. I just think my mom just basically, she just used me and she just made me do bad things, become like prostitution, sell my body for money. They are very poor in my country and make them to sleep with men and they beat them up. And they are really bad because they take like girls who doesn't know how to write, how to read. These kind of girls, they will take to do these things.
Christina's story, unfortunately, in Western Europe is quite typical. We've had a lot of family complicity in the prostitution of their children, and it is desperate situations and desperate poverty that quite often force those situations, and it's not isolated by any means. We know that there are families at the moment in cities in the UK that are prostituting their own children to gain funds because they have no recourse to public funds and they can't get themselves back home even if they wanted to. Combat stands for Combining Against Trafficking. Okay, we're an EU-funded project through what's called the Daphne funding stream. And in the EU, the Daphne funding stream funds projects that tackle violence against women and children predominantly. And trafficking victims, 75–80% of all victims are women and children. Okay, so that's why Daphne decided to fund an anti-trafficking project. CSWP headed up the bid for that and was the lead partner. We actually, through a partnership search through West Midlands European Centre, managed to get a partner in Lithuania and one in Bulgaria to work with us on the basis that the land border between Turkey and Bulgaria is a main land trafficking route, and on the basis that we were seeing a high percentage of young women from Lithuania being trafficked to the UK for prostitution. Our partner projects in Lithuania and Bulgaria, they're very much more at the front line, if you like, and they're working with young children and young women at risk of being trafficked to the West and trying to empower those children to resist the recruitment methods of traffickers. We deliver training to frontline practitioners across the three authorities, Coventry, Solihull and Warwickshire, for the Safeguarding Children's Boards. So we deliver the awareness raising training to police, social workers, youth offending team officers, and what we try and do is to make them more equipped to identify victims of trafficking and tell them what their responsibility is under the law regards protecting those victims and how they make a referral on a victim of trafficking through the national referral mechanism to the United Kingdom Human Trafficking Centre, and that is their responsibility. You know, not many people know or understand about human trafficking, and there's still a culture of disbelief.
I come from a fairly a fairly stable middle class upbringing in this country, and didn't know anything about this problem. And even as a police officer for nearly 28 years, when you start talking to some of these people who've been involved in this, who we've rescued from prostitution, from trafficking, you realise that we're dealing with people who've probably never had a childhood, who've only ever lived in fear. There are all sorts of drugs and alcohol problems that go with it. There's a continual fear of who's going to knock on the door next, where you're going to be taken next, and also a fear of authorities, that the authorities are not going to take you seriously. Or in some cases, if you come from parts of the world where you can't trust the authorities, there's a real lack of trust in people wanting to come forward and explain what's happening to them. The evidence that we've got so far is it is a massive problem, but trying to quantify it is very, very difficult. One of the reasons being that because we have open borders, there are so many more people who are entitled to be in the UK, and I guess there's an assumption that when people arrive here, they're here for for either a holiday, to seek employment. It's very, very difficult to identify people who are being trafficked when you've got open borders, and that is part of the problem.
People being trafficked into this country are 99% legal because they're coming on the premise of a job, so they come with proper documentation. They are in the belief that they're going to, a better life. So in terms of trafficking, there isn't an issue around the border. Whatever the level of control you have in place, it would make no difference because they are being trafficked with legal documentation. So they'd be allowed in if their documentation is correct, which it would be in trafficking.
It is important to say that pimps and gangsters, they're very smart. They're very good psychologists as well. Sometimes they make you believe that he loves you, that he tries to help you. But once they cross the border, they can do nothing about it because their passports are taken away. Most of them, they can't speak English at all. And they're also threatened and they're afraid to try to escape. In most cases, those pimps and gangsters, they know where they live in their country. They know all their families, so they say, if you try to escape, we'll find your father, sister, or brother, and we'll kill them. So they're like sacrificing, and they're trying to save the people they love.
It is very interesting to know what you are doing here, because you are mainly country of destination, but we are mainly a country of origin. The victims of our country comes here, but the tendency is the Bulgarian boys and girls come to here for begging and pickpocketing.
A lot of it is very mixed up in a lot of other organised crime issues, whether that's drugs or money laundering or fraud or a whole host of other things, is difficult to say. But the organised side of sexual exploitation is linked into many other things. The newer phenomena we haven't recognised, like internet grooming and that exploitation, the benefit fraud, I think they're just new versions of exploitation. As sophisticated as it all is, the more we tackle it, the more sophisticated it gets.
We've got a particular problem with a certain amount of countries. Okay, these are the ones that are always top of the list for trafficking, and that's Vietnam, Nigeria, China. In terms of Eastern European countries, we've got Romania, the Czech Republic, and the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia. Trafficking from different countries is for different purposes. Trafficking from Vietnam is predominantly for the cannabis factories, okay, and it's the Vietnamese triads that are running that area of organised crime. Trafficking from China, because of the surfeit of girls, because of the one-child policy, is usually for prostitution, young women for prostitution. Trafficking from Nigeria is quite often for domestic servitude and to a lesser extent for prostitution, but also more worryingly that has come to light of late, trafficking of young prepubescent boys from Nigeria and Uganda for ritual bloodletting. Okay, so trafficking from different countries for different reasons. From Eastern Europe, trafficking for prostitution, trafficking for forced labour, they're the main issues. We certainly have to be very much more vigilant about training up the border force in spotting situations and victims of trafficking, without a doubt. We have to definitely consider further resourcing of the border force. But when you're talking about the EU and open boundaries, the borders having come down in Europe, a lot of people who are coming in from A8 countries or A2 accession countries, they have a legal right to be here, as we have to go to their country in Europe. They don't have recourse to public funds. When they arrive here, they find themselves in extreme situations of poverty, no access to benefits, can't get work, and they're very, very vulnerable thereafter to being internally trafficked.
There's some work we can do around borders. I think if young people are turning up at our borders with a rucksack on their shoulders and they've come to meet Uncle whoever, we should be a little bit more inquisitive about, well, who are you meeting and what are you here for? And I do think there's that our borders are so busy, and this is not a criticism of the border agency, but with open borders, it is difficult to control who comes in. Enforcement alone is not the answer, and enforcement in dealing with human trafficking is extremely difficult. It's very difficult to get evidence, it's very difficult to get witnesses and victims who are prepared to stand up and go through a whole court process, because quite often their status in the country is in doubt. If we rescue somebody from a brothel for the sake of argument, we've got to be able to provide them with somewhere to live, with some means to live, with a support network. All of this costs money, all of this costs resources. The bottom line is our law is based on a victim standing up and giving evidence so that we can prosecute people. If you can't get the victim to do that for whatever reason, then it's very, very difficult to get prosecutions in court. And that is both the strength and the weakness of our criminal justice system.
The only thing we can do about it is increase the intelligence gathering, make awareness and education a much bigger issue amongst the general public, but also amongst frontline practitioners that are tasked with protecting individuals that may have been trafficked. And at the same time, we've got to try and get all of the intelligence forces across Europe and internationally, Europol and Interpol, to have a united front on it, for them all to accept that they have a responsibility for tackling trafficking. At the moment, there's only about 25% of the countries in the world that are actually doing anything about trafficking, even though 50% of the countries in the world have signed up to the Palermo Protocol, which is anti-trafficking protocol. And it's, we need to work on that. We need these people to be working. It's a transnational organised crime, and we need people to be working together on it. It won't surprise anybody that most of the countries that aren't doing anything about it are where a lot of the victims are coming from.
We've got more and more understanding and recognition of the issue of trafficking, and because the government now, with its strategy, is with all of the government agencies really taking the trafficking issue seriously now. And with the work and the passionate commitment of the NGOs, I think there's a lot more confidence in recognising it, but also in the victims being able to come forward.
This is a really big problem that we have overlooked for a large number of years. What we have to grow is our understanding about how it happens, so that when we see these young people, when they do come to our attention for whatever reason, whether that's through education or whether that's through youth offending or whether it's through police or children's services or the neighbour next door, then we have to be able to recognise what we're seeing.
I would like to go back just to see my dad and my grandparents, but for other side I cannot go back, because if I go back then these people will gonna find me, because I don't think so they will forget me ever that I tell the truth to the police.
I don't think anybody realised what was going to happen when we opened up the borders in Europe. Nobody was prepared for it. Who was prepared for it was the traffickers.